Welcome to a new Zman of Smichas Chaver program. How was last Zman? Good? How was the test? Okay, hopefully we'll find out this week. Hopefully we'll find out this week how the test was for everyone. We'll try to get that back to you this week. I'm going to try. Ezra Hashem. So everyone here, I assume, is committed to taking the test for this Zman? Show of hands. Who's taking the test? It's a different Zman if you commit to taking the test up front. No? Okay. Okay, we'll keep at it. Second announcement: does everyone have WhatsApp? Because I'm planning to do only communication through WhatsApp this Zman. Yes? Okay, fine. So we're just going to use the WhatsApp group. If anyone's not on the WhatsApp group, I think you're all on it. If you're not on are you all on the Smichas Chaver WhatsApp group? Do you know? You are. Yisrael, you're on it too? The Smichas Chaver WhatsApp group? You're not. I have to add you. Okay. And we have a gentleman in the back. I don't know if you're joining us. Okay. I don't think you're on the WhatsApp group, but we'll follow up after. Okay. If anyone wants to contribute to sponsorship for the Zman, please, which helps, of course, to defray the cost of the breakfast and the babysitting, and as a schus for whatever the sponsorship is, for all the learning, please speak to Doctors Z and T, Dr. Zuckerbrot and Turner, who helped organize that the last Zman. Everyone who participates and everyone who's here learning should see tremendous bracha v'atzlacha. The Gemara says in Shabbos that when a person after 120 years goes up to Shamayim, b'shah shemachnisin adam ladin, one of the questions he's asked 6 questions. Okay, he's not asked, did he come to davening on time? There's a lot of things that he's not asked. The first question he's asked, before kavata itim l'Torah, before did you make time to learn? The first question he's asked is, anyone know? It's famous Gemara? Nasasav and asata b'emunah. Did you do business with honesty? That's the first question. Now the Aruch HaShulchan explains, what does it mean to do business with honesty? It means not to steal. Someone who does that is a Rasha Gomer. That's not the question that they're going to ask you. Did you follow did you keep what it says in the Torah? Of course you kept what it says in the Torah. That's not the question. Ela kavana, the kavana is that hein shaloi tzedek v'lav shaloi tzedek. That when he says yes in business, it's truthful. And when he says no, it's truthful. And when he says this is the price, it's truthful. When he says this is good stuff here, right here, this is good stuff, it's truthful. Af b'kolshu, he doesn't lie even in a nuance. V'sheyehei masa'o u'matano b'nachas u'mabrios. And that his business with people is softly, it's gentle, it's pleasant. He's not, hey, could do the deal, come on. It's pleasant. V'diburai benachas, and his speech is pleasant. V'lo yitzak, he doesn't scream, he doesn't yell, or curse, or get angry, or whatever. V'soif hadavar, and in the end, if a person does business like that, shegam eschar halich b'shem tov, his business is going to get a good reputation. Uparnasasim is umanas loy, his parnas is going to be there for him. V'hakol ma'aminim loy, everyone's going to trust him, his reputation. Abaytech b'Hashem chesed yisavenu, and someone who trusts in Hashem, the chesed will surround him. I know a very, very successful diamond, what may be the most successful in the world, diamond merchant. Glick, it's very famous, right? Shimi Glick. Anyone ever heard of Shimi Glick? Yeah, you've heard of him. Okay, so he's a religious billionaire, and my grandparents are very close with the family. They are the most, I know his son-in-law, the Plucheniks, this is being recorded, I have to be careful. They're most refined, gentle speech you would ever see from anyone. Never a word that's untoward or rough or just princely. And the person and those two things go together. And we see, and so that's what we're learning about this month. We're learning about, if you wanted to summarize it, other people's money. That's what we're dealing with. How to deal with other people's money. So we have paying people on time, interest, and tzedakah. We're dealing with other people's money, and at a high level, this is our acting in the right manner in this arena is the first question we get asked after our time on this world. It's not how much did you give to tzedakah, it's not how much money did you make, it's gonna sasav and asata b'emunah. You do that, everything's gonna follow. So we're gonna try, so by learning the details of these halachas, which most people never learn, is going to help us understand the practical of how to do business, but also the spirit of the law is going to stay with us from engaging in this. So take the booklets. They are all inclusive this time because we're moving between Chosh and Mishpat and Yeridea, and so they have there's photocopies within the booklets of the actual Shulchan Aruch. But of course we're going to begin with questions. There is a blackout in your house in the middle of the night. You didn't have a generator, and the community's Jewish electrician who lives next door comes to fix it. When's the last time that you can pay him? He fixed it in the middle of the night. He fixed it in the middle of the night. But don't ask me questions. I ask the questions.
Depends.
It depends? What do you think? When do you have to pay him? When you agreed upon? Let's say there's no agreement.
Is there a standard? When the profession dictates, you have to pay.
When the profession dictates, okay. Let's say there's no standard.
Right after you're done.
Right after? Within how long? That's the question. What? End of the day. What's the day? He did the job in the middle of the night.
Before morning.
Before morning.
For the money.
Before morning? Okay, we'll see. What? Next question.
Although the night is already considered the next day.
Is the night the next day for these purposes? Next question. You are renting an apartment. You're renting a house. These questions are crafted, I think, with Israel in mind. Let's adapt it to Southfield. You're renting a house from a Jewish landlord. That's common. At the end of the month, he comes to collect the rent, but you do not have the money. And he tells you, besides for not paying me, you were over an Isser D'Oraisa of delaying payment. Is he right?
I thought that was only for a worker.
You thought it was only for a worker? So if you rent something and you owe, so rent payments are not included? Is it an Isser D'Oraisa? Pasuk says, Lo yisah shoik sochir. Don't withhold the payment. Sounds like it's an Isser D'Oraisa. Again, so for those of you who are new to this forum, I argue with whatever you say in the question and answer session. We're going to go to the substance in a second.
If the set payment period you pay at the end of the month, you're going to be service, you live there for a month, but it's still, the period is the end of the month.
The period is the end of the month. At the end of the month, he comes to collect, and you didn't pay. So did you violate the Isser of the Torah with the requirement, the biblical requirement to pay on time? That's the question. What? It's just for wages. It's not for rent.
I mean, from the reading of the Chavetz Chaim, it seems like...
From the reading of the Chavetz Chaim.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to see.
How it's tested, I think he's saying it's just...
We're going to have to see about that. It may extend to rent. Is there a difference between rent and rent of land? Okay, we're going to get into all this. You get a call from the cleaners on Tuesday that your suit is ready. Are you obligated to go pick it up and pay for it that day? Or the car mechanic? What do you think? No way, right? Why not?
Part of the business, they expect you to.
They expect you? Okay.
The contract changes that.
Okay. What if there's no contract and there's no expectation?
They're also holding
Do you have a chiyuv? Ooh, they're holding on to it. Is that different where they're holding on to it? Ah. Mazel tov, your daughter's wedding was incredible. Do you have to pay the band right after the wedding?
Yes.
When? When's right after the wedding? A minute after the wedding?
The standard is right after the wedding.
I'm not asking about the standard.
All night.
All night. Why?
It's all night.
Because the pasuk says, right, if it says lo talin, there's a pasuk that says don't let it stay overnight. What about the flowers? If it's a takana package, I don't know. But what if it's within all the takanas? Do you have to pay the flowers? Is there a chiyuv of non-delaying payment on the flowers?
Different for items versus service.
Ooh, is there a difference between items and a service? What are you paying for with the flowers? Are you paying for the flowers or are you paying for the arrangement? And does that matter? There is no baltalin on purchases, that's for sure. So buying the flowers and you delay payment on that, that's not baltalin, but we'll see. I think the last question. You are on your way home after work with your friend, and you realize that you both went out to lunch together that day. You were living in Manhattan, or you went to Prime 10, and you realized or different restaurant. No, that wasn't meant to be partial. No, never.
Except for president.
You have to be here on Shabbos. No.
You heard you say shofar.
You heard me say the word. Well, like yesterday, you heard what I said. Okay, we're not. Let's take this. Let's take this after. I will say that anytime any political topic comes up on Shabbos in the drasha, always someone says, "So is that an endorsement?" Always. You are on the way home after work from the restaurant, and you realize that we forgot to pay. We just walked out without paying. And your friend tells you you have to go back and pay because it's if not, it's Baal Tolan. It's a problem of delaying wages. What do you think?
Same questions before. Are you paying for a service or item?
Well, what is it? You tell me. What is it?
It's both.
It's both? So what's the din?
And you're not paying an individual.
You're not paying an individual, you're paying a business, no. But someone owns the business, so. Should go down because it's an item. That's the reason why not. 'Cause you're paying for the food.
For both, they cooked it for you. You didn't go to one stop, you went to
Okay, but you're paying for food. Part of your payment is for food. And there is no Baal Tolan on paying for food, paying for items. If you go and buy something for me and you want to be reimbursed, there's no Baal Tolan there. That's for sure.
Well, now it's they separate the service kit from the.
That's a tip. That's a tip. That's a tip. Well, but if it depends. If it's prime 10, then it's included in the bill.
So maybe you only need to pay for the service part, and then tell them that you'll pay for the food.
Okay, everyone open your booklet. We have a lot to cover. Page 1, Simon. We're going to start with the sources in the psukim. Okay, there's three psukim that are operative. We're going to go through them quickly. It's in Issa D'Oraisa, but we're going to go through the psukim quickly, and we'll see the Gemaras fairly quickly, and then get to some of the principles and the application. The first pasuk is in Parshas Kedoshim. The pasuk says, "Lo yisashik es re'acha v'lo yisigzol." Do not cheat your friend. Do not steal. Lo yisalin pula asachir itcha ad boiker. Do not leave the wage of the worker with you until the morning. Okay, and that Gemara says to understand, it's talking about someone who does work at night. You have to pay him by sunrise. Pasuk in Parshas Kiseitze, source 2, Lo yisashik sacher ani ve'evya, in the same language, don't withhold the wage, even though Lo yisashik I translated as cheat. If you look at Rashi in source 1, Zeh hakovesh schar sacher. So all these lavim are referring to the same concept, withholding payment. So don't withhold the payment from your brother. Megercha shavartzacha b'sharecha. B'yoymai titein scharoi. This is an affirmative mitzvah, an aseh. So there was a negative, a bunch of lavin. Don't withhold, don't withhold, don't withhold. B'yoymai titein scharoi. On the day you should give payment. V'lo yisav elav hashemesh. And do not let the sun set. Talking about a worker during the day. You have to pay him by the time the sun sets. Ki ani uvei lavanois is not because he's poor. And to you, he's willing to risk his life. Okay, this is the pasuk. Says the Gemara of Mitzia based on these psukim. Amru kol hakovesh schar sachir. Source 3. Everyone sees it. Anyone who withholds the wage, oiver behei shemes halalu va'aseh. He violates 5 lavim and an aseh. Bal tashak, bal tigzol, bal tashak sachir ani, bal talin, b'yamitit schar, and l'savav shemesh. Everything that was in the psukim, even though I said some technically seem to apply more to schir yom, some seem to technically apply to schir laila. But the Gemara says, but it's all talking about the same concept, and any kind of withholding of payment is subject to 5 lavim and an aseh, which the Mefarshim tell us is just to underscore the importance. The Chinuch writes that the Torah repeats a prohibition multiple times to show its severity. Now let's see the Gemara that will show us how quickly you have to pay under this requirement. Says the Mishnah in Bava Metzia source 4, Schir Yoim Goiva Kol Halayla. If he is a day worker, he did the job during the day, then meaning, and that we'll see that means he worked the entire day. Okay, so then Goiva Kol Halayla, meaning he worked up until the end of the day. Then Goiva Kol Halayla, then the time that he must be paid is the following 12-hour period. Schir Laila, if he's someone who was working throughout the night and his shift ended when it became the day, then Goiva Kol Halayla, then he collects during the day. Says the Gemara, how do we know this? From the pasuk that says, "Tanar Rabbanon." Let's see, how do you know that someone who was hired during the day, who worked during the day, that he collects at night? Because so we say that the pasuk that says that you have to pay him by the morning means he was working throughout the day. You have the night to pay him up until the morning. And the second pasuk that says that you have to pay him during the day means he was working at night. Okay. So you have to pay. So you have to pay right away. I mean, you have to pay in the 12-hour period, in whatever. Like we just said, if he finished if he finished by a day worker has to be finished in the night, and the night worker has to finish in the day. What if he's only a partial? He didn't work the whole period of time. So that's the end of the Mishnah. And the way the Gemara explains it is that if, let's say, he worked part of the day, then you have to pay him that day by nightfall. And if he worked for part of the night, then you have to, we'll see this all in Shulchan Aruch in a second. When he worked for part of the night, then you have to pay him before the night ends by daybreak. Now, what if you didn't? Do you violate constantly? So the Gemara says at the end, Milan, because the pasuk says ad boiker, that's extra. It could have just said lo ysalin pu'ula sachir, don't leave the wage overnight. Obviously, that means until the morning. Matam lemar ad boiker. Why does the pasuk have to add those two words lo ysalin pu'ula sachir itcha ad boiker? Milan, to teach you she'enei over ela ad boiker rishon, that the isur d'oraisa only is that first moment. You missed that cutoff. You missed the first morning. You're over. Mikan ve'elech, further delays do not incur additional prohibitions, but there is an important prohibition midrabanan that we're going to apply a lot in this whole sugya. Amarav oiver mishum bal tisha. He violates a rabbinic prohibition of delaying the wage. What's that from? That's from a pasuk in Mishlei, bottom of page 1, source 4, the last line. The pasuk in Mishlei says, "Al tomer l'reyacha, lech v'shuv umachar etein." Don't tell your friend, the booklets are in here, don't tell your friend, go and come back, umachar and tomorrow I'll give you the money, v'yeshitach, and you actually have the money now. So if you have the money to pay, and you tell someone to go to leave, and to come back, that is a iser de rabbanon. So there's so on top of the general 5 lavan 1 asay, there's also a de rabbanon requirement to pay on time.
That one's continuous?
And that one's continuous, right? And that meaning there's that sits on you regardless.
How do we know it's Durabana?
I'm saying it's a pasuk in Mishlei. I'm saying Bal Tisha is just a phrase that Chazal used. There's no pasuk that says Bal Tisha. That's Gemara number 1. So that teaches us the basic parameters of when you have to pay. How much after the completion of the work do you need to pay? Next, turning the page to page 2, source 5 at the top. What goes into the prohibition? Is it just wages of workers, like most, I think, people in the room think? Zok the Mishnah in Bava Metzia, Echad Schar Adam, Echad Schar Behema, Echad Schar Kelim. It's a Mishnah. Whether you are renting a person, meaning paying a wage for someone's services, or renting an animal, or renting kelim. So it applies to whether So paying for an employee, paying for rentals, all are subject to the biblical requirement to pay on time. It does not apply when making a purchase. If you made an agreement to buy something and you don't pay on time, that there's no question, doesn't apply to that. Let's turn to the Shulchan Aruch to see how this comes lahalacha. So the Shulchan Aruch is on page 5. It's a little bit of flipping. Okay, this is a new kind of booklet where the Shulchan Aruch is here in the booklet. So if you go to page 5, this is Siman Shin Lamed Tes. Okay, we're going to go through it fairly quickly because we've summarized the key parts of it already. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Sif Aleph mitzvah lasis schar sacher bizmana. There's a mitzvah to pay the workers on time. V'im ichrein, if you delayed over balav, you violate a lav. Echad schar adam, ay behema, ay kelim. Whether it is paying for a person, paying for or rentals of animals, rentals of equipment. Shulchan Aruch says, aval al schar karka. What if it's renting land? This is page 5, Sif Aleph in the Shulchan Aruch. What if it's renting land? You notice the Mishnah that we saw did not say anything about land. So the Shulchan Aruch says it's a machlokes. Yesh mishay misheina over. There's a question whether rental of real estate is subject to this requirement. You have to pay your real estate rent on time. Midoraisa is a question. You have to pay your rent on if you're renting a tuxedo on time. Midoraisa. But your rent on land is a question. And the Pischei Tshuva, if you turn to page 6, says there's a whole machlokes whether a house. Well, it is a question whether it applies to land, and the reason why it may not apply to land is because the pasuk. Sorry, it doesn't really apply to land because the pasuk says ba'artzacha, and Rashi says that ba'artzacha means in your land, but not renting land itself. Without getting into the details, I've seen some people trying to figure out like what's the is there a principled distinction between land and everything else, and it's not really relevant to our sugya. We're just doing the halacha. But I've seen a svara that people throw out there that there's no depreciation when it comes to land. Land doesn't lose value. So we're more strict. You have to pay on time when you're renting an object that your use of it depreciated the object, but land we're not as strict. Okay, that's a svara. What?
What about my own wages? I don't depreciate. Like if I work for someone, I don't depreciate.
You spent your energy, you spent your time, your resources. Absolutely, yeah. Like we learned that on Shabbos. Trump doesn't exercise. Remember? You use your kaiches for something else. You're depleting them. The bottom line. That would be just land. So houses do depreciate. Anyone knows tax? Got accountants in the room? Houses depreciate, right? That's why people go into the real estate business. That's half the reason, right? They get depreciated. Oh.
Wouldn't it matter the use of the land? Meaning, if you're growing crops, you're going to have nutrients in the soil versus you just build.
I hear. It's okay. Again, it's time of the correct. The bottom line is there's no question. Land. There are those who hold that land is not subject to this, but it's a machlokes. Some say that it would. Some say that houses are different because houses are detached and that are attached, and they're not really considered mechuber. The bottom line is it's a question. You see in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says yesh mi she'omer she'eina over. So what do you do in a suffix d'oraisa? L'chumra. That's the Pischei Tshuva's psak. Pischei Tshuva says, if you look at the top of page 6 in the Pischei Tshuva, you see the Pischei Tshuva is here at the bottom. Everyone see? Holding it up, so you see where it is? Underlined. L'inyan iser bal tolin shu iser d'oraisa yesh lachish l'das apaiskim. You have to be chayshish to be machmir. Okay, bottom line. He says it like a few different places there. So the bottom line is that, and again, for the test, there's a test, and everyone here is going to plan to take the test. The bottom line is that when it comes to real estate, it's a question. Shulchan Aruch brings different opinions, but we are machmir, like the Pischei Tshuva, that real estate rentals are included in the prohibition as well, including the requirement to pay on time. It is the Gemaras talk about that. I have to get Yeah, I think that's what the Gemara says. I believe that's what the Gemara says. And there's a question whether houses are called karka.
Would it matter if there was like a late fee for paying late?
What do you mean? Would it matter if there's a late fee?
Like if someone pays their rent late after a certain amount of days, there's an extra charge. Does that matter if the person's not losing out by paying late?
No, I don't think that matters. No, you have to pay on time.
So is it multiple? Like if the person's allowed to say you can pay me.
Okay, so can you make an agreement to pay at a different time? That's a good question. We're going to learn about that.
And then the late fee is almost like as in like you could pay late as long as you pay the fee.
Yeah. So if you want to see more on the karka, you look at the sma. So the two main nois kalim that we're going to deal with in Choshen Mishpat is the shach who is this mine? Yeah, is the shach who we know from Krakow. The shach the Sifsei Kohen is the most respected commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. It was published when he was 25 years old in 1646 in Krakow. He was born in 1621, and he died about 18 years later. The Sma, the Sefer Miras Einayim, on the left, is the same person who wrote the Shprisha and the Drisha, which is a good commentary on the Tur. We mentioned him. He's also sometimes known as the Mari Katz. He was Rabbi Yeshua HaKoyen. Falk was his last name. He was the chief rabbi of Lemberg in Poland. He lived a little earlier than the Shach, late 1500s. I mentioned him and his mother over Yom Noraim and Sukkot. His mother has a famous shita about Lachas Neiros, which we're not going to get into now. So that's who we have here: the Sma and the Shach. So if you look to see more about the karka business, if you look at the here, I underlined it, but it's not underlined here in the notes. But Shimmy, you're asking about the source. If you look at about schar karka, here it's here on the side. It's in Sifkat and Beis in the Sma. The Darshina Nasher Ba'artzacha V'le Artzacha Mamish. Okay. Well, let's continue on. So again, first sif of Shulchan Aruch, sif aleph is that you have to pay on time, and it applies to rentals of everything, but not karka. But we're going to be machmir for karka. Next, kol kevish charsach kilometer nishmasei. That's very strong lashon. That if you withhold the wages as if you took his neshama. A person who's expecting to get paid, he put all his kaiches into this job, and you don't pay him. Serious thing, and that's darshan from the pasuk that says "Who noisei the elav who noisei es nafsho," like you saw on page 1, source 2. And violates the 5 lavin and the asay, like we saw in the Gemara. So, Seif Gimel, turning the page to page 6. The Shulchan Aruch says "Zeus manoi." What's the time to pay? Schir yom, if you worked all day, yesh leizman in la, then you've got to pay him at night. Skipping to the wide lines, schir laila, if he worked all night, zman elitna lekol hayom, then you've got to pay him. During the day, and if not, you violated the law. Says the Rama, upoyalim didon, and our workers. It's not so common to have people to say you're going to work all daylight hours, you're going to work all nighttime hours. Usually, it's a few hours. So that in that case, says the Rama, shenaisim lachad alayla. They don't work all the way up to nightfall. They do, right? They go home at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, depending. I know there's all kinds of shifts and doctors and people in here and accountants. And I know I'm not going to single out any profession. You all work late hours sometimes. But if you're not, kivan sheshaka alav chama, then as soon as the sun sets, over alav mishum b'yamatiten schara. Okay, which is what we described outside from the Gemara about a schir shois. If you're working for a few hours and you don't work all the way up until nightfall, then you need to be paid by nightfall. It's much less time. You must have malach, right? You must have malach at alayla. It's true. And if you and that's for some reason it's not about hours. It's about day or night, and maybe because people need meals for days and meals for the night. But and the same thing if he is the if it's at night, which is really what the Shulchan Aruch is the Rama goes into other things here that we're not going to address. If you look at the Shulchan Aruch in Sif Daled, He's saying this again. There's really a little bit of a subtle difference in what the Ramah was saying there and what the Shulchan Aruch is saying here. The Ramah is talking about a day worker who finished early, and the Shulchan Aruch is talking about someone who's only working for a few hours. But the bottom line is it doesn't matter. If you finished your job and there's still daylight, then you have to be paid by nightfall. That's Shulchan Aruch Siv Daled. Schir shoyis and kol schirusay b'yom yesh l'tashim kol sayim. If you're working for a few hours, you're an hourly worker, and it's the same as what we just said. Then you have to be paid by the end of the day. And if you were working for a few hours at night, not necessarily for a few hours, you could have been working for 17 days, but your work finished during the night. Yesh l'tashim kol sayim. You need to be paid that night before the night ends. Sif Hey elaborates on that. Schir Shabbos, Schir Chodesh, Schir Shana, Schir Shavua. It doesn't mean only someone who's working for an hour or a day. It could be working it's a big job, it's a trial, it's a week long, it's a month long, a year long, 7-year long project. When did you finish? You finished during the day? You got to be paid the full thing that day. Yatsa B'layla. If you finished at night, halayla. Okay. Skipping to Seif Ches, Ovar Zmano, if the time passed, Ein Balabayis Ev Mishum Baltalin, then once the time passed, you do not continue to violate the lav of Baltalin, like we saw in the Gemara. You only violate that the minute you miss the cutoff. But even though Baltalin, it no longer applies, because Baltalin means don't let it stay overnight, and you let it stay overnight. So that you can't fix that. But you still have a chiyuv to pay him immediately. You have a constant obligation to pay. And any time you delay, oiver alav shel divrayim shenemar al termer l'reyacha. Right? So he's quoting passing like the Gemara. You violate a lav and issur d'rabbanan. Okay, before we're gonna recap this in a second. Okay, so that's the basics of the Shulchan Aruch. So we start from the Psukim, we went to the Gemaras, and now you see how it is all paskined in Shulchan Aruch. Let's just see one more din in the Rambam, which is flipping back to page 2 of the booklet. Does this apply to non-Jewish workers? So that's what some would say. The Rambam says the Rambam says that it applies even to a guy. Source 6. If you see the Rambam, this is the Rambam in Minyan HaMitzvahs. Hisbayer shezeh mechuyev b'chol schir yom bein benachri bein b'Yisrael mitzvah sa'aseh lefroya bizmana. Presumably from the aseh, which doesn't say the word reacha. So the Rambam holds. So the Gemara of Metzia derives from the language of the Psukim, achicha reacha, that the lavim do not apply to non-Jews, but the Rambam paskins that the aseh, the positive command of b'yametiten scharoi, which does not have those modifiers, does apply to non-Jews as well. To summarize, before we get to questions, the requirement to pay on time applies to workers and to rentals, and we are machmir to include real estate rentals as well. For someone who works all day, you have all night to pay. For someone who works all night, you have all day to pay. For someone who works a few hours in the day or night, you have until the end of that day or night to pay. For someone who works for weeks, months, or a year, if he finishes his job in the day, you have until nightfall to pay. If he finishes at night, you have until morning to pay. If you do not pay on time, you violate Baltalin. If no payment is made on subsequent days, Baltalin is not violated, but there is a rabbinic prohibition of Baltisha, and you are required to pay a non-Jewish worker on time, though it just would implicate the aseh and not the los aseh. Those are the basics of the rules. Then we're going to go to the exceptions of the rules, which are very important, and then we're going to go to practical applications.
Does the chiyuv kick in when the worker is expecting to get paid, or when he says, when he finishes working, or when he expects to get paid? Meaning that, let's say he finishes the job at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he tells you, don't worry, you don't have to pay me for another 2 days.
So agreements to pay is going to come up. It is one of the exceptions. We're about to learn about it.
But if he says, pay me in 2 days, then does that mean that all these chiyuvim kick in 2 days? Or
Good question.
Once he is done with his job and he's saying, don't worry, you can pay me later, even if there's a set time on that pay me later.
Yeah. Yeah, great. It's a good question. No, they don't apply because they can't. They only apply for Baal Talon. But we're going to learn about that now, the exceptions to the rule. Yeah.
You said if someone was working a job for a full year, finishes in the day, you have until the night to pay. But if someone is working part-time during the day, you have until the day to pay? Why should it be different
If some,
a job?
I'm sorry. If all that matters is when you ended the job. If you ended the job and there's still daylight left, then you need to be paid by sundown.
For
Doesn't matter what.
short-
Doesn't matter if it's short term, long term.
The long ones, we said you have until the end of the next 12 hours to do it.
I don't think so. No.
No?
No. If I said that, I misspoke. No, if you go to the Shulchan Aruch, no, it's the same. The point is it's the same. Meaning it doesn't matter whether it's, you look at Seif A again. So it's always the same. The point is, there is no distinction. Whether you're working for 2 hours or for 2 months.
What about a salary employee? I'm not sure how that's going to factor in.
It's the same thing.
It's not like it's not
Unless you made an agreement.
It's not totally on that.
It would be totally in the agreement that you made, and we're going to see about which it will fall under one of the exceptions.
But if he doesn't ask you for the money,
That's another one of the exceptions. Which we're going to get to now.
When a worker is working for a whole day,
Yep.
and then he works for 15 minutes and he does it all,
Yep.
so would that, you obligate to pay the worker for the daytime hours?
No.
and also,
No.
Or just wait until
No.
night?
If he didn't end until the nightfall, then he ended at night, and then you have all night to pay. Okay, so now we got to do the exceptions. I think before we get into the sources, because I want to make sure we cover the material, we're going to do them outside. Okay. Here are the 6 exceptions, where if you do not pay on time, you still do not violate the prohibition of Baal Talon. Number 1, the worker didn't ask to be paid. Number 2, you don't have any money. Number 3, you sent the worker to a third party to collect the wages. That's a little bit of a weird case. It's, like I said, go pick up my tab at the grocery. Then because I'm not paying you, even if the grocer didn't pay you, I don't violate Baal Talon. Number 4, if I am known to pay only on a certain date, so we know that I pay bill 30 days out or something like that. I think it's hard to do these in the abstract as I'm saying them, but number 5, if the product which was serviced has not yet been collected, the cleaner's example. So they called and said that your cleaners is ready, but they didn't give it to you. You don't have to pay. Or you didn't hire the employee directly. You used a third party to hire them. Okay, let's get into the those are going to be some of the exceptions which apply. And again, we're still at the level of like academic, like learning the sources. We're not really applying it to actual. We're going to have many fact patterns to walk through after this. Some of which are this week, and some of which are next week. Okay. Now there is this interesting nuance here. I'm going to tell you something that the note says, but it's not everyone agrees to this. We're going to learn about these exceptions to the requirement of paying on time. In these situations, you don't violate the isser of not paying on time, but you still didn't perform the mitzvah of paying on time. And so if you could, you should pay on time even there to fulfill the Yom HaTiten Schar. Not everyone agrees to that. That's a recurring kind of point in the notes here. Rebbe Yashiv is quoted in Sfarim as saying that B'Yom HaTiten Schara is exactly parallel to the Lavim. And if it's an exception to the Lavim, and the Lavim don't apply, there's no Asay either. You don't get anything by paying on time. But that's a point of debate, just a side point. The notes go with the Shita that even when you didn't have a requirement to pay on time, you still fulfilled the mitzvah if you did pay on time. Okay, fine. The Gemara says, source 7, page 2. When is there a requirement to pay on time? If the guy asked to be paid, using the case of the worker, if he came and said, "No, I finished my job, pay me," Loi tavai, if he didn't ask, ain't ever, and you're not ever. That's exception number 1. Yeah, page 2. Next, Okay, fine. Skipping to the third line. You might think that you violate the law even if you don't have any money to pay. You're the employer, and you don't have money to pay when it's time. Talmud lemar itcha, sheyesh itcha. Itcha means you have the money with you, and you're just withholding it. But if you don't have the money, there's no lav. This is the third exception. If you say, I say to the worker, hey, instead of me paying you, go to the grocery and buy on my tab. Or go to the money changer and he'll pay you. In that case, I'm not violating the law, even if the guy doesn't pay you, even if the grocer doesn't allow you, because itcha means it's with you. It's when I'm dealing with it directly. Those are three exceptions. Source 8 is going to be the fourth exception. Says the Gemara. Hani, Rabbi Bar Avuna said, Hani shukoi desura. This is a farmer, and he hires workers on Sunday to pick apples, but they know he only pays them on Thursday, after he sells the apples on the day of the shuk, on the market day. So in that case, loy avri mishum baltalin. They do not violate baltalin by not paying the day of the apple picking. So I hire you to pick apples on Sunday. I don't pay you that night. There's no violation because meidayadi, surely they know that I'm relying on the market day. Says Rashi, Hilkach afilu islay mois gabei lo yavar. So even if I have money with me, I don't need to pay you because it's understood that I am only going to pay you on Thursday after the market day. This is the exception that if the owner, the employer, is known to pay at a certain time, and that's understood from the outset, then there is no lav of baltalin that he has to pay that day. Avol mishum baltisha vaday over, the Gemara continues. But, and Rashi says, miyam mashuk ve'elech. But, whatever that point of time is, when it is understood that I normally pay, I have to pay you then mid-derabanan. And if I don't, then I violate it, then the person would have violated. It's a derabanan. What?
The third party paying.
We didn't get up to the third party yet.
No, the paying one. We just did the.
Yeah, we said, yeah, right.
That one.
There's a different
also
third.
only when it's implied in the beginning doing the services. You can't say that after the fact. Say, oh yeah, go to him to get it. It's only when he agrees initially to do it. Kind of like this one is that you're going to use it.
No, I don't know if that's what it is. I don't know. One more source, source 9, is this is where you gave the person performing the service also took your property to perform the service to it. Hanoisen talisa leuman. Everyone sees it? Source 9. You gave your talis to the cleaners to fix. Gomra, he fixed it. V'haidiyai, and you told me, you called up and said, hey, your suit's ready. Afilu mikan vad aser yom and every mishum baltalin. Even 10 days later, if I haven't paid, there's no violation. Why? Because you still have it. Nasnalai, once you gave it to me, let's say you gave it to me in midday, then it's as if your service ended then. So the service terminates when you give it back to me. When the cleaners when I pick up my suit, then, if that's b'chatzi ayom, mishashakal of chama ev mishum baltalin, then as soon as the sun sets, then there is the violation of baltalin. So that's exception number 5, which is, you gave your coat to the cleaners, your car to the mechanic. They call you that it's ready. Technically, their work ended then. Do you have to pay them by the end of the day? No. You wait until you don't have a chiyuv to pay them midaraisa because they're holding on to the object. Until you pick it up, then you have a chiyuv to pay. Right? Then it's as if it's midaraisa. Okay? Then it's as if their service terminated then, until you have whatever is left of the day to pay, or if it's at night, the rest of the night, like we said. No.
I've had a suit at Ray Workers' house for the past month.
No problem.
No. Well, I didn't have shyness in it, so therefore I just haven't. It just keeps. Excuse me.
No problem. That's exactly this case.
It's hard to understand though. I know time is a crow. Like the fact is, like if he uses money for his meals, but
That's
the reason
something
he
that's
is
for better result than
service isn't done.
But a service isn't done until you got your suit back.
Is it though?
And that's specifically,
He could take that suit and pay at a certain point, sell it himself. I mean, at a certain point, he could do that.
I mean, if he calls you and says, I want you to pick it up, you should go and pick it up. But
Why would this
Yeah.
apply at all? It's a kablan, right?
yeah, I'm talking about a kabbalah. That's what we're talking about.
Right, so why would it apply at all? When we talk about a schir yom, it's a completely different category, isn't it?
So we don't distinguish ultimately. We were saying that anyone is schir shos, it's the same thing. Meaning if someone is, I am paying you for a service. It's not like you're an hourly versus project based. It doesn't matter. We're not, these halachas don't distinguish between a kabbalah and a sar. I know in some contexts we make a distinction. Are you paid by the hour, paid by the project? It doesn't matter. If you finish the job, whether you are an hourly or a project based or a contingency fee or whatever it is, when whatever point in time in the day that you finished, I need to pay you by the end of that day, unless there's one of these exceptions apply.
Here, I mean, the pasuk says schir, doesn't it?
The pasuk, yes, the pasuk says schar sachir. But we interpret it to rentals broadly. I mean, it's applying to, renting anything. So renting a person. However,
There's no other like stealing involved. Let's say you don't have money, right? The person has no money and you do the service for you. There's still other problems with not paying the person. It's just you're not over this lot.
Right. Of course. I mean so if you look at if you I don't know if I think it's in Rashi. The first pasuk that I don't want to get too delayed, but if you see the first pasuk, it says lo sa'ashok esreyacha v'lo sigzol. So I think it's a Gemara, a Rashi. So someone that's the difference between lo sa'ashok and lo sigzol. Lo sa'ashok is you intend to pay, you just didn't pay yet, and lo sigzol is you're withholding it entirely. But this is off the yeah. So exactly that's what I said. We'll see more about this later. Okay, so again, the sixth exception is we don't have the Gemara Bab Metzia in the sources, but that is if you hire workers through an agent, okay, and the agent made it clear that you're going to pay, you don't violate Baal Tolan because you didn't personally hire them. So if you're a CEO of a big company, and there are workers you didn't personally hire and they're not paid on time, you do not violate Baal Tolan because you didn't directly hire them. Okay? Let's try to quickly see where in the Shulchan Aruch we see these exceptions. Seif Yud, Ein Balabat, which is page 7 at the bottom, Ein Balabayas over Mishum Baal Tolan El Im Kein Tavo HaSachir. Number one, he has to ask, or the rental company asks for payment. If they don't ask, then or they asked and I didn't have the money to pay. Again, if they don't ask, then I don't violate it. The Chafetz Chaim Paskins in the Siv HaChesed, we don't have this in the sources, but it'll be in the notes, that a worker does not need to verbally ask for the money. Even if he just approaches you after he completes his job, as is customary, to let you know that he finished, you have to pay. Okay? So that's exception number one. Exception number two in the Shulchan Aruch is Shetavo v'lo hayu lo ma'is litin. He asked you to pay, he said, hey, I finished, but you don't have any money. Reb Kiva Eger quotes the chinuch that this is when you not only do you not have cash, but you do not have anything that's worth the amount that you owe. But if you have shava kasef, you have valuables that you can sell, then you're obligated to do that. It's in Reb Kiva Eger here at the bottom of page 8. You don't worry about seeing it inside. It's a little bit dense, but it's at the bottom of page 8.
If he said that he's finished, then it's considered as if he asked for it?
Yes. That's not Reb Kiva Eger. That's the Chafetz Chaim. So again, exception number one is if the worker does not demand his wages. And the footnote to that is the Chafetz Chaim says he doesn't have to actually ask for wages. He just has to come and tell you, I'm done. Exception number two is if I don't have the owner doesn't have money to pay. And the footnote to that from Reb Kiva Eger is that even if I don't have cash on hand, but if I have other valuables on hand that are worth that and I can sell it not at a big loss, then I have to include that too. I have to sell that too. The next in the Shulchan Aruch is Himchei Eitzel Shulchani, which is again, we're not gonna focus too much on this one, which is where if I sent you to go to the money changer, and we all agree to this arrangement, then there's no Isser of Baltalin because it's not me paying you directly. I'm just going to put that to the side. Fine. The Shulchan Aruch in Siftes, going back one. Sachir, which is this is exception number 4, where the owner is known to pay only on a specific date. See Siftes. Sachir shemakir bebal abayis, page 7, Siftes in the Shulchan Aruch. A sachir who knows that this employer she'ein darko lios biyadamo isel b'yem hashuk, that he normally only has money to pay on Thursdays after the market, for example. Ein over baltalan afilu yesh loimais, right? Just like we saw from the Gemara in Bava Metzia. Even if he has the money to pay, but since normally I don't pay until Thursday, then I'm not over baltalan. And from that point on, miyam hashuk ve'elech, then there's an issue of the Isser D'Rabbanan. Okay? The Shulchan Aruch in Seif Vav, I know we're going backwards, but just in order of the exceptions that we saw in the Gemara, is the case of your property being with someone else. Nasan talisa leuman lesakna. If I give you my shirt to fix it, and you did, kozman shatas be'aduman ena over, then as long as then I don't violate anything. You don't violate anything until you give it back. But once you give it back, over mishum baltalin shekablanos hi kischirus. That's Dr. Zuckerberg. That's kind of getting to your point. The last line in the Shulchan Aruch in Sivav, shekablanos hi kischirus lapayra bizmanai. Kablanos is treated like schirus for these purposes. They have to be paid on time, but when he took my property, then his service didn't terminate until he gave it back. Siv Zayin, the top of page 7, is ha'imr l'shluchay tzeyus charli poyal, and this is if I appointed an agent to hire workers, and you, third party, hired the workers for me, even though he told you scharchem al balabayis, no one's over baltalin. The Sma explains that the balabay, I didn't hire them, so there's no baltalin for me. The shliach didn't agree to pay them, so there's no baltalin for him. So those are the 6 exceptions. Doesn't demand his wages. The owner doesn't have money. The owner sent the worker to a third party to collect. The owner is known to pay only on a specific date. Your product was number 5. Your service has not yet been collected. And number 6, the employees were hired by a third party. We have 8 minutes left. We are going to try to get through the 6 practical applications that we're supposed to cover to stay on track for today. This is a little more dense. This is Choshen Mishpat. This is not Hilchos Birchas Hamazon. So that's why it feels like a lot, because it is. So now we're going to try to apply these exceptions. Again, he continues in the notes to say that one should go out of your way to pay a worker on time to fulfill the assay. Again, not everyone agrees that you can fulfill the assay in a place where the exception applies. Okay, cleaning help. Example number 1, cleaning help. If you hire a non-Jewish cleaning lady for a few hours during the day to help clean your house, according to the Rambam, you have a biblical obligation, biyomo titein scharo, to pay her by sunset.
This all applies
Next.
to Goyim?
What?
These rules apply to
No. What do we say about Goyim? The Rambam says, what? That the assay applies to Goyim. The Lavim for sure do not apply to Goyim. The Rambam says that the assay does too.
So if she works at night, then you're fine.
What do you mean you're fine?
You're saying love is not.
Oh. You're saying, according to the Rambam, I don't think so. You're saying the Yamatit and Saran applies during the day hours?
Because Berotet Fo is assay and Berotet is fine.
Yeah, right. But I think B'Yamatit and Schar is understood. You have to pay that 12-hour period. That's an interesting question. You're saying, is it B'Yam Dafka? I don't think so. I have not seen that. The Rambam is not clear about it. The Rambam just says Chir Yam. Maybe that's the literal. Okay. No. Yeah, I didn't see any distinction. Again, to clarify, according to the Rambam, if you hire a guy, you have to pay them on time, as we defined. That means if you hired them during the day, you have to pay them at the end of the day. If they hired them at night, you have to pay them at the end of the night. A cleaning lady, a night nurse, whatever it is, you got to pay. Midoraisa. Unless, of course, there is something that you arrangement that you made. But otherwise, you have a chiv to pay right away. Okay. Next example: electrician, plumber, painter, handyman, sofer, anything like that. You have to pay him before the end of the day, unless you have made some other again arrangement. You have violated a lav and an aseh. Okay. Next example.
And in terms of that stipulation to pay beyond the time,
Yeah. So
it
let
has
so.
to be verbalized, I would assume?
So I'll jump right to that, and then we'll come back to this other one. So as we saw, the Shulchan Aruch in Seif Tes says, this is all derived from that case in the Gemara about the apple picking employer, where we all know I'm not going to pay till Thursday. So in that case, I don't violate Baal Tolan. It can be inferred from here that if the worker agrees to be paid at a later time, the owner does not violate Baal Tolan. The Shach has a detailed example from the Sefer Hasidim about hiring a sofer. The Shach, we're not going to have time to see it inside. It's on the top of page 8. It's very, very brief. But he says that when you hire a sofer, it's going to take a long time, and you should make a deal that you don't have to pay right away. So it's clear that you can stipulate that our Baal Tolan is not going to apply to our agreement, and we can make our own time for when the payment is due. So this is clear that Baal Tolan is not violated if the worker agrees to be paid at a later. Basically, in the language of Dan, in the language of contracts, you can contract around it, right? You can the presumption is you've got to pay on time, but you can contract around it. You can make a deal to pay later. Okay, however, source 11, source 11? It's not, source 11, going backwards, to page 3. So, Kitzur Dine Baal Tolan, he says that if it's not clear that the worker actually agreed, he just doesn't want to, he's embarrassed, he's not comfortable, he's like reluctantly agreeing to say, okay, fine, you could pay me another week, then it doesn't count, and you still violate Baal Tolan. So it is important to ensure that your worker fully agrees to be paid later. It does suffice if he verbally agrees. Not everyone, this is the Kitzur Dine Baal Tolan, not everyone agrees to that. Rev Bodner, in his Sefer of Halachas of Other People's Money, says that even a reluctant agreement is effective as long as it's clearly. Today, many service providers do not bill or charge for their work until much later than the actual work was done. Like an accountant, therapist, programmer, lawyer, or editor, in such cases, Baal Tolan is also not violated since the worker didn't request payment until a later time. Going back, one other point. We learned that you don't violate Baal Tolan if you don't have many money to pay or you don't have valuables. Do you need to borrow money if you don't have any money? So if you look at the Nesiva Chesed, page 3, top of this is the Chavetz Chaim. He says that if you can borrow money, you should, in order to fulfill the aseh of Biyom Titein Scharo. However, the Aruch HaShulchan, and it's brought in the Pischei Tshuva here, you can see it in the sources in Sifkat and Ches, this is Midas Chasidus. It's not a requirement, it's something that you should do, but you don't have to do it. According to both opinions, if on a Friday afternoon you need to pay your cleaning lady, but you don't have cash on hand, it is definitely better to knock on your neighbor's door, borrow money, and pay her, than to arrange with her to pay on Sunday, since that wasn't what was agreed on initially. Although you do not, again, going with that same shita, since you don't violate Baal Tolan because she agreed to pay it on Sunday, but you have lost the opportunity of paying on time. 3 more examples. We have 1 minute. When making a wedding or another simcha, there are many services where one may violate Baal Tolan: hall, furniture, photographer, band, waiters, babysitter, makeup artist. The flowers. The flowers is tricky because there's 2 aspects. One aspect is they're purchasing the flowers. On that, there's no Baal Tolan. The second is the setup. On that, there is. That's a service. If they split it into 2 payments, then you'd have Baal Tolan on one and not on the other. The same would apply to a catering company. If you're paying for the food and then you're paying for the service, the payment for the food is paying for the purchase of an item, and there's no Baal Tolan there, but on the service there is. Now, if if it's all blended, right, and there's like a per plate cost, which I think is how it's normally done, the Pischei Tshuva and the Aruch HaShulchan say that in this case, when you have a blended offering, where there's the worker's job is to buy something for you and enhance it through his work, right? Like a flower, florist, or a caterer. In that case, it is always considered a sale, and Baal Talon does not apply. That's an important sound. So the Pischei Tshuva, which is here, we don't have time to see it inside. Okay, so based on this, if you didn't pay the caterer on time or the florist on time, and it was a blended price, it is viewed as a sale, not a service, and you do not violate Baal Talon. Similarly, this would apply to a restaurant. Remember, we had a question about you didn't pay the restaurant on time. You're doing the same thing there. You're buying you're paying the restaurant for their purchase of food and enhancing of it. So in that case, it's a blended thing. It's viewed all as a sale. You're just buying a big fancy food from them, and there's no Baal Talon on the use of the restaurant. Last hypothetical is rent. We said paying on time is midoraisa. We applied even to real estate. He has one little nuance wrinkle about rentals. If most rental contracts, I don't know if this is true, if are upfront, they're requiring you to pay for the coming month at the beginning of the month. There's no doraisa requirement to do that. Ein schiras mishtalemes ela b'soif. The Torah's requirements to pay are at the end of the month. So if you did not pay in advance, you wouldn't violate Baal Talon. You might have breached the contract, but you didn't pay Baal Talon. If you didn't pay at the end of the month, you also didn't violate Baal Talon, since your agreement was to pay at the beginning of the month. Okay? Although which is like the case in the Siftes, although the rabbinic prohibition of Baal Tisha would still be transgressed, it should be stressed that in rental agreements where the agreement is to pay at the end of the month for the previous month, then you do violate Baal Talon.